Kristina Downs is the Executive Director of the Texas Folklore Society and Assistant Professor of English at Tarleton State University. She holds a PhD in folklore from Indiana University and an MA in folklore from George Mason University. Her research focuses mostly on legends, particularly the ways legends interact with history, literature, true crime, and digital culture. She's appeared as a folklore expert on the History Channel's The Unexplained and the Tubi documentary Scariest Monsters in the World. She's currently studying Texas outlaw legends, and it is my pleasure to bring to you Kristina Downs.
Pistols, poker, and the petite Mademoiselle in a stagecoach. Stagecoaches and stage routes, so far as the American scene is concerned, usually connote New England, where the Concord coach was fabricated and where the deathless Peter Rugg traversed all ways at all hours leading to the hub city. Deadwood in the Black Hills, which its Treasure Express made famous, the great overland route in California by way of Salt Lake City, which Mark Twain, Horace Greeley, and many other notables rode over and rode about, and the Gold Coast, along which there were over 3,000 miles of stage roads before a public coach crossed the eastern boundary of California. In Texas, the dominant mode of travel was horseback. The dominating tradition of movement has been boots and spurs. I shall take up the horseback tradition in a later chapter. A half-century ago or so, Austin was headquarters for numerous cowmen known from the Mexican Gulf to the Canadian Rockies for their activities with horses and cattle. There was Colonel Robert Driscoll, who built the Driscoll Hotel, which has more character and more history attached to it, the Menger in San Antonio accepted, than any other hotel in Texas. The marble busts of Driscoll and his two sons that rest high up outside on pilasters supported by bullheads symbolizing the foundation of the structure and cattle money. There was Major George W. Littlefield, who embronzed the doors of his bank with extremely interesting bas-reliefs depicting ranch scenes, and who then turned over $250,000 for the erection of the most atrocious water horses, etc., that have ever perhaps marked the entrance to any university campus in the world, thus giving the University of Texas one distinction at least. There was Bill Blocker and his brothers, who one winter roped together enough maverick cattle out on the Llano thickets to put up a big trail herd. There was Doc Day, who, with his brothers and partners, operated ranges scattered from Gonzales to Montana, and who rode Stonewall Jackson. If the old-time Texas cowman was finicky about anything in the world, it was about his meat. Meat was the principal article of his diet, and in those days I'm talking about the big cowmen of Austin used to ride horseback early every morning to a certain market on Guadalupe Street, select personally their steaks and roasts, loiter a while with each other to discuss the market and the prospects of rain, and then ride home. After he laid in the day's supply of meat, Doc Day used to ride Stonewall Jackson downtown, hitch the bridle reins loosely around the saddle horn, and turn him loose. Stonewall Jackson would promptly trot back to the day residence where he was unsaddled and fed. Then about noon, a servant would saddle him again and turn him out, and Stonewall would go back to town to pick up his master. But Texas, too, had stage routes and coaches of 6. Without stories of holdups and Indian fracasses, the tradition of stagecoach travel in the West and Southwest would lose much of its savor. The lore of pioneer stage travel in Texas, as well as elsewhere, is sprinkled with such stories. According to one yarn that has come down, Jesse James and the Younger brothers once held up a stage between San Antonio and Austin. Among the passengers who stepped out, hands up, was a young lady, as spirited as any Dick Turpin who ever rode the roads. One by one, the other passengers shelled out. When her turn came, she said, "Well, I've got some money. I've got it to go to school on. You can shoot me if you want to, but I'm going to keep it until you take it off my dead body." "Well, keep your money, you plucky little devil," Jesse James retorted, and she kept it, and the stage rolled on. Another time, another traditional anecdote goes, a stage was crossing the San Saba River about dark on the way to Maynard when a lone bandit cried, "Halt!" Then, "Hands up!" One of the 2 or 3 passengers was a meek-looking young man dressed in black. "Mister," he whined as the holdup approached close enough to tickle him in the ribs with his 6-shooter, "all I've got is a watch that my congregation back east presented to me and $5 to start me on my work." "Fork him over," the bandit ordered. "But what is your work?" "I'm a minister." A preacher? Yes, and I'm to hold services in Menard tomorrow. The watch now in his left hand, while the Colt remained steadily pointed in the other, the robber paused, a new interest in his voice. What's your church? He asked. Baptist. Take your watch back, brother, and keep your 5, the man in the mask fairly gloated. That's my church, too. Here's 5 more for the collection. Put out, he nodded to the driver, who usually took such interruptions calmly and impersonally, and the stage left standing in the road a man who had the aspect of being well satisfied with a day's deed of virtue. Between Blanton and Lampasas, another order to tumble out brought before the bandit a line of passengers, including a lawyer and a quiet little woman. After they had all delivered, got back in the coach, and had gone some distance, the lawyer reached down into a hidden slit among the cushions and extracted a fat wallet. He was pleased with his success, and the little woman congratulated him on his cleverness. Along after dark, the coach drew up in front of a dinky hotel in Lampasas, and the passengers were assigned rooms for the night. The next morning, the lawyer's wallet was missing. So was the little woman. She, it was then found out, was one of the hold-up gang. Something besides a bog hole or a bandit might hold up a stagecoach in Texas. Along in the 70s, a stagecoach drawn by 4 horses and bound for San Antonio was carrying 2 nuns, a man named Louis Ginger, and the husband of Rowdy Kate. The husband, Rowdy Joe, was the proprietor of a gambling hall, saloon, and a crew of dancing girls in Luling. And he was recounting to his fellow passengers how a jury of 12 good men had recently acquitted him without leaving their seats for killing a low-down dirty skunk. They were rolling along at a pretty good pace, recounts Louis Ginger, when suddenly the 2 leaders whirled around and came alongside the coach door, bringing the stage to a stop. The driver yelled out, "Great guns, what a rattler!" There in the middle of the road was the largest rattlesnake I believe ever seen in Texas. It had struck at the leaders, apparently missed them, but frightening them terribly. We all got out of the coach, the 2 sisters of Charity, Joe, and myself, while the driver quieted the horses. Joe said, "Just watch me cut that fella's throat." He had a .45 Colt and stepped within 15 feet of the squirming monster, who was making a noise with his rattles that could be heard for at least 200 yards. Joe fired, and true to his word, almost decapitated the monster with, almost severed the head of the monster from his body with 1 shot. The driver said he'd lived in Texas all his life, and he had never seen such a rattler as this one. The snake was over 8 feet long and as large around as the body of a leg of a good man, around the body as the leg of a good man. The rattlers were 20 in number and about 5 inches long and as thick as my 2 fingers. Diversions like these were what made travel, especially by stage, interesting in a raw land such as Texas was before barbed wire and railroads tied it down and tamed it. No matter how numbed and cramped by hours and days of confinement to a jerking seat, a passenger might expect some novel relief. When Albert D. Richardson was traveling across Texas in 1859 by the Butterfield route, he stopped at a stage stand on the Concha River for dinner, where the spirited little landlady had a tale to tell that she calculated to arouse expectations. Only a few days before, she said, she and her husband had barricaded themselves in the station with rifles and stood off 120 Comanche. As a rule, there was not much diversion in the meals at the stage stations. "Breakfast!" the driver shouted an hour before daylight to his tired, frowsy, half-dead passengers at a stand on the Pecos River. Nobody was hungry, but it was 40 miles to Fort Stockton and nothing but grass and greasewood along the way. The passengers got out and went to the station house. One was a valetudinarian. "Boiled beans," he moaned. "They would give an ostrich indigestion at this time of the morning." "Try some bacon," suggested the cook, indicating a platter half full of grease. "Nothing but grease, grease," moaned the valetudinarian, too lifeless to really fulminate. "There's cornbread," the cook slammed down on a tin plate. "I'm not an Indian or a mule," the delicate man mumbled. "Then damn it," the driver paused from his gorging to advise, "help yourself to the mustard." Help yourself to the mustard is still the byword in some parts of the Southwest. There were stage routes up and down across Texas, but the most glamorous of them all was the Butterfield, the transcontinental or the overland Pacific route, which stretched 2,750 miles from St. Louis to San Francisco. It entered Texas over Colbert's Ferry on the Red River, ran through Sherman, passed by frontier forts of Belknap, Chadbourne, San Angelo, Lancaster near the Pecos, Stockton and Davis, and Paz de El Paso. Butterfield in 1857 secured a bountiful government subsidy that enabled him to equip the route. The Civil War ended it. Overland stages to California thereafter going north until railroads replaced them.
For those of you who don't know this, I mentioned earlier that it was established in 1909. Kristina is the 10th secretary editor in all that period. So it's a very elite group.
No pressure.
So my question to you in regards to the Texas Folklore Society is, what do you think are Dobie's lasting contributions to the society itself, to the organization?
I think Dobie is really well known for the fact that he recognized that the culture of Texas and the Southwest was just as important as things that are often thought of as being more elite or more, whatever, that tend to be documented more, that you get more in school and all of those kinds of things. But I think the other thing that often gets overlooked that's so important about Dobie and so important to what we try to do still with the Texas Folklore Society is that while Dobie did a lot of great collecting and documenting of folklore himself, he also really encouraged other people to document their own folklore.
Yes, he did.
Because he understood that community members can document their own community's folklore better than anyone else can. He was such a inspiration, so helpful to so many other people and facilitating them doing the research rather than just taking over and going, oh, I know better, I can do it better than you. And so I think that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind as the Folklore Society, that our job is to help people study their own folklore as well.
And because that's very important, because what would happen if we didn't?
Right.
We'd lose it.
Exactly.
So thank you very much, Kristina. Let's give Kristina Downs another big hand.